So I've created a schema for myself that I haven't seen exactly reflected in the literature that I've read, but I found it to be useful to me. So I'm going to share that with you. And some of you have been on other courses that I've done where we've worked with emotion. So if this is repetitive, bear with me for just a minute. So when I use the word sensation, what I'm talking about is an experience of some stimulus in the body that you don't assign an emotional word to. So for example, I might feel a stirring in my solar plexus, but I'm not calling it anxiety yet. I'm literally experiencing this sensation. I might feel heat in my neck and face, but I'm not calling it embarrassment. Do you see how as soon as I call it embarrassment, there's an interpretation that my mind is using? So I'm assigning a word to it. It means that I'm interpreting it in a greater context of meaning. Just to say my face is hot is very different than saying I'm embarrassed, which implies that there are other people present, right? Embarrassment creates a much bigger interpretation. One of the reasons it's important to make this distinction is that when we practice feeling, we need to drop to the level of sensation and actually encounter what the sensation in the body actually is, because it can often be chaotic or unfamiliar. It can be, it can hurt. You could feel a clenching that's painful, or a gripping, or if you're feeling, let's say, tremulousness in your limbs, you want to move. You just want to move away from it. It's like you're almost being stirred to move, and to just simply feel it is very difficult. So one of the skills that we're going to work on is really connecting to sensation and coming to understand what's happening in the body. It's a really, really important part of the work with feelings. What I call a feeling is any sensation in the body that we've already added a cognitive label to. And if you go to the internet and you look for names of feeling, you'll find these really massively kind of beautiful and long lists of names. And there is a correlation between our ability to use more nuanced terms with feeling and how we understand them. So it's probably one of the things that we'll do is go to the internet and look at these lists. So if I say, oh, I feel happy, that's different than saying I'm ebullient, right? There's just a different quality to that. There's more subtlety and texture. So sensation, feeling, emotion, and this is very important because this has everything to do with how we learn to work with it. Emotion involves the feedback loop between our meaning-making mind, our cognition, and the sensations we're having in our body. So for example, let's say I have a little dust up with my spouse in the morning, and I feel my spouse didn't keep his agreement, and I feel, let's say I feel some sensations in the body of intensity. I feel some gripping. There might be some aggression. I'm furrowing my brow. There's a quality of frustration and a kind of a demandingness, right? Now, if I just experience that directly, both the sensations and then those words, that's an interesting experience. But I'm also, most often what happens is we don't drop back and feel it. We go into our mind and we start spinning a narrative about what's going on. And we fail to really acknowledge much at all of what's happening in our body and in our interpretations. Is that fair? So my thing is like I'm stomping around and I'm noticing it, but it's self-righteousness. And I deserve to be self-righteous. And why is it that after all these years, we still don't keep our agreements? And why does he have to be so blah, blah, you name it? So I completely avoid the intimacy with my own process, and I get involved in a story that most often is about him or about them or about that or about those people. But the important point is that story, to the extent that I'm telling it, is stimulating more sensation in my body. And the more sensation there is in my body, the more it stimulates my cognition. And now I'm thinking, well, all those other times he did that, and 20 years of this, and now I'm really going, and now my body's even more stirred up. And then later in the day, I'm starting to feel calm, and he walks in the door, and all that memory comes flooding in, and all the emotions are right back. So emotion is that feedback loop between body and mind that can keep an emotion flourishing. Okay. And right in there is the real trick with how we learn to work with our emotions, and how we can learn to feel fully, and how we can learn to let emotion go. That's where the pay dirt is, if you will. Now, when you are prone, as we all are, conditioned by our upbringing to feel certain things and not to feel others, and we tend to feel certain emotions or have certain emotional processes with regularity, that's a mood, right? I'm pissed. I'm sad. I'm hopeful. I'm tender. And there's a habit to our moods, right? It's something that we get familiar with, and it's a more sustained experience of the emotion, right? Lots of times when people start to have a mood, they literally forget what the emotion, what happened. Like now they're carrying a mood, and they literally have no relationship to what it was that generated the mood. Have any of you had that experience? You're in a mood, but you don't know why, right? When a mood is sustained over time, it becomes a character trait. A sad person, bewildered person, an angry person, where you're now that person, because that emotion, the texture and the feeling tone of that emotion is that one is inhabiting it enough that literally it becomes part of how other people describe you. So this is the spectrum of emotion that I use to understand how to work with this body-mind interface. Does that make sense to you as a working idea, everybody? And it's important because we need to differentiate sensation from cognition to work with feeling. And we need to know how to interrupt cognition from the body in order to really develop more fluidity and freedom with our feeling states. Now,